Whispering Pines Motel, inspired by a story from Art True Scary Stories. It was one of those muggy Tennessee nights where the air sticks to your skin like a heavy blanket. 2 years ago, I found myself on a solo road trip driving from Nashville to Knoxville. Plan was simple: get in the car, blast some music, enjoy the open road, and decompress from the chaos of work and life. I hadn't accounted for just how exhausting the drive would be. By the time I reached the halfway mark, the caffeine from the gas station coffee had worn off, and my eyelids felt like they were lined with lead. The highway stretched endlessly in front of me, swallowed in darkness except for the faint beam of my headlights cutting through the night. My body begged for rest, and I knew I couldn't push on much longer without risking an accident. That's when I saw it, a weathered old sign perched on the side of the road, its letters faintly glowing in the flickering green light of neon tubing. Whispering Pines Motel, vacancy. The name sounded inviting in a strange, nostalgic way. I figured it would be a cheap, no-frills place where I could crash for a few hours before continuing my drive. So I pulled off the highway, following a winding dirt path that led deeper into a thicket of tall pine trees. The road was so narrow that the branches scraped the sides of my car, creating an eerie sound that set my nerves on edge. When I finally reached the motel, I had to blink a few times to make sure I wasn't imagining the scene before me. The place looked like it had been frozen in time, straight out of the 1970s. A single row of 10 rooms lined up neatly under a sagging awning, their paint chipped and peeling. The office was a tiny building on the far end, its window dimly lit by a buzzing fluorescent bulb. Behind the motel, the pine trees rose like looming sentinels, their shadows shifting in the faint light. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under my boots, and made my way to the office. Inside, a frail elderly woman sat behind a cluttered desk, flipping through a yellowed magazine. She looked up at me with a polite but distant smile, as if I were interrupting her routine. "Room for the night?" she asked in a voice that was soft but somehow flat, like she'd said the same words a million times before. "Yeah, just one night," I replied, feeling awkward under her hollow gaze. She handed me a key attached to a wooden tag with the number 6 etched into it. No questions, no forms to fill out, just a key. It was weirdly convenient, but I was too tired to care. I thanked her and made my way to my room. Room 6 was just as unsettling as the exterior of the motel. The air inside was damp and carried a faint musty smell, like the room hadn't been aired out in years. The walls were covered in faded floral wallpaper that curled at the edges, and the carpet was a dull shade of green, worn thin in places. A single lamp with a stained shade sat on the nightstand, casting weak, uneven light across the room. I set my bag down and turned on the heater, which groaned to life with a mechanical wheeze. The bed looked clean enough, though the mattress sagged in the middle, and told myself it was just for a few hours. Sleep, and then back on the road. But as I lay there, something about the room felt wrong. At first, I chalked it up to the atmosphere, the creaks of the building settling, the wind rustling the trees outside, and the distant hum of the highway. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, I began to notice a sound that didn't belong. It was faint at first, so faint I wasn't even sure I was hearing it. A whispering sound. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The noise seemed to be coming from the wall behind me, the one that separated my room from the next. It wasn't clear enough to make out words, just soft murmurs that rose and fell, like a one-sided conversation. My rational brain kicked in. They were just someone in the next room, maybe on the phone or talking in their sleep. But then the whispers stopped. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and tried to settle back into bed. That's when I heard it again, this time closer, louder. It wasn't just whispering anymore. It was scratching. Long, deliberate strokes of something sharp raking against the wall. My stomach tightened as I stared at the spot where the sound was coming from. The scratching wasn't random, it was methodical, like someone was tracing patterns into the wall just behind my head. My mind raced through explanations. It was an animal trapped in the walls. A raccoon, maybe. But no, this sounded too precise, too deliberate. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. The scratching stopped abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that I was just overly tired and imagining things. But then something happened that shattered any hope of rationalizing the situation. The whispering returned, only this time it wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from inside the room. The whispers were soft and fleeting, impossible to pin down. They seemed to come from all around me, above, below, to the side, yet there was no one there. My breathing quickened as the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like something was pressing down on me. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door, not even bothering to pack my things neatly. As I fumbled with the lock, I glanced back into the room one last time. That's when I saw it. In the dim light of the lamp, faint scratches had appeared on the wall above the bed. They hadn't been there before. I didn't stop running until I was in my car with the doors locked and the engine running. The gravel sprayed behind me as I peeled out of the parking lot, back onto the dirt road that led to the highway. I drove for miles before pulling over at a 24-hour diner to catch my breath. I spent the rest of the night in my car in the parking lot to shake into sleep. The next morning, still rattled, I decided to look up the Whispering Pines Motel out of morbid curiosity. A quick search pulled up an old news article from the local paper. It was dated nearly 2 decades ago and detailed a grisly murder-suicide that had taken place there. A man had checked into the motel with his wife and 2 children. In the middle of the night, he'd murdered them with a hunting knife before taking his own life. The article mentioned the room number, room 6. To this day, I can still hear those whispers when I think about that night. I haven't stayed in a roadside motel since, and I probably never will.